ॐ जननीं शारदां देवीं रामकृष्णं जगद्गुरुं पादपद्मे तयो श्रित्वा प्रणमामि मुहुर्मुहुः. So, welcome to this new session on the divine play of Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi. And we, in the introductory talk, and the first talk that was organized last Tuesday, we saw that we can broadly classify the divine play or the divine life of Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi chronologically, but in a general way, we said that there are three important phases of her life. Uh, the first part of her life is how she initiated her divine play by preparing herself as a world teacher. So that was when Sri Ramakrishna was alive, and after his Mahasamadhi, the preparatory phase apparently ended, and then she enacted her second. We call it a divine play because avatars and great spiritual personalities, they normally are not born because of their karma. They have a special mission and purpose in life for which they are born. So they are not bound by any past karma. So they, whatever they do, they enact a sort of a divine play, and there are many other people to support them. For example, Sri Ramakrishna was such an avatar as he is defined. Hinduism defines such divine personages as an avatar who have exceptionally different qualities than that of a jiva, than that of an ordinary human being. And when such people, such personalities come to guide you, mankind, in a very big way, in a major way, and as Swami Vivekananda very often said, they don't come very often. Maybe in every 500 years, they seem to appear. Roughly, that is the period. So we have the advent of Buddha, then we have Christ, and there are so many other prophets and divine people who have had a huge influence on the lives of human beings since time immemorial. And in the Great Master also, we saw how the rishis of the Vedic age came to be known as avatars in the Puranic age because they had these special qualities which made them quite different, or maybe made them quite special, endowed with certain divine powers which could not just change things. Miracles and all are very minor things. Any transformation that appears to be miraculous in the gross plane, uh, like saving, curing certain people, these are, according to the Indian yogic science, they are all powers, no doubt, and the avatars are endowed with those powers, but they are not very significant in the sense the transformation that takes place in the inner personality, the deeper aspects of a human being, to change that, to transform a person from a worldly minded person to a spiritual person, that requires a divine power that is not possible. So these spiritual personalities, when they appear, they come often when Sri Ramakrishna came, he brought a spiritual concert, and as we discussed last time, in this particular manifestation of a divine prophet or a divine avatar, as we say, the spiritual concert who normally came with the earlier avatars did not have a major role to play. At the most, they played a supporting role. Whereas in this incarnation, as Swami Vivekananda has observed, Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi played a major role, to the extent we can even say that if you see the lifespan, she lived for more than 34 years. So the divine mission was extended beyond the Mahasamadhi or the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna. The gross physical existence ended in 1886, but after that we see the first part of her life where we can see, which is known as the Adi Leela. We discussed that. Her the which comprises events from say 1853, the day she was born, till 1886, and most of that part was spent in Kamarpur, Jairambati, where she was born, and later in Dakshineshwar. But by the time she came to Dakshineshwar, she had grown up, and she was almost 17 or 18 years old when she first came. So her childhood life was spent mostly in Jairambati in rural Bengal. And after 1886, we can say it is the Madhya Leela, the period when she was on her own. So whatever spiritual training or whatever spiritual sadhana had to be done, that was done before Sri Ramakrishna passed away. And then he handed over his mantle of redeeming innumerable souls. His own instructions were, you have to take care of them. So Sri Ramakrishna said, you have to do much more than what I did. So you have to guide them. So she became the Sangha Janani when the order was formed much later. And even before that, she took care of all the devotees and all the well-wishers, followers of Sri Ramakrishna, the philosophy, or maybe the experiences that he discussed in the gospel and demonstrated through his own life. These experiences he came to revalidate all the different paths within Hinduism and outside of Hinduism, that all religions or all faiths are valid paths to a goal which has been decided by that particular tradition or path. The goal may appear to be different, but the essence of spirituality, or the core values of spirituality, do not change in whatever be the path. They are defined or they are described in different ways. A personal God may be the goal for a particular faith or sect. A impersonal God, as in Advaita or even in Buddhism, they don't even use the word God. They just use the word liberation. Whether you call it liberation, freedom, moksha, mukti, nirvana. So there are so many ways of describing the same goal. But in essence, it comprises of raising one's personality. That's why we are planning to start a new series of talks, maybe from tomorrow, Wednesday, where we'll discuss the science of human possibilities. Because this spirituality is a science. It's not just a religion as it is popularly understood all over the world as some kind of faith based on certain principles, certain commandments, certain dogmas. That is not what true religion is. True religion is the spiritual core of every religion, which essentially says that human personality has to be understood in depth. Whatever we understood is something very superficial. Whatever we have understood till now, or we understand, or we try to understand, is something gross or maybe something subtle, but we don't go deep enough to understand the human personality in depth, or try to explore the various human possibilities. I use the word possibility because these possibilities are in potential form. So the highest religion or the highest spirituality explores and teaches you how to reach or express manifest those possibilities which are potential. Their potential in human being, irrespective of the faith to which he belongs, and they have to be manifest in a way peculiar to their particular faith. It may not be the same path. There are thousands and innumerable paths. As many paths, so many faiths. As many faiths, so many paths. So each faith promises to take you through a series of experiences or through a series of sadhana or maybe efforts which lead to certain experiences which manifest these human possibilities to the fullest extent. So total fulfillment consists in, if a human being starts with a limited concept of a human being, say is as a gross body, then he may think that the gross body is everything. In fact, there are several stories in the Upanishads which say that different people approached Brahma, and then they, by his advice, they misunderstood. Some people thought that the ultimate goal is the body and body alone. So they spent all their time strengthening the body. Some people, of course, they went and the prana or the vital force to make it strong, make it healthy, and make it last long. Because they saw or they sought to seek this immortality in the physical personality. But some people went beyond and they found that at the intellectual level, a far more deeper human being can be recognized at the intellectual level or the level of the mind in a subtle way. That opens the door to many possibilities which show that not just physical existence but mental development, the height of intellectual development can make a better human being. So those possibilities are explored, the mental possibilities. And then finally we go a little higher where we gain some kind of control over our thoughts, the root cause of our manifestation, the manifestation that we see in the outer physical world, and also our intellectual acumen, which we uh, train our children, we train everybody to develop a kind of intellectual capacity. So beyond that, we go to the root source and transform our very tendencies, latent tendencies, potential tendencies, which are known as samskaras. So that happens at the causal level. And that personality has explored more of the human possibilities and or expressed more of the human possibilities by going to the source and trying to express as much of divinity or the possibilities that are lying dormant in the human being. So the more you go deeper, the more you study a human being in depth, the more of spirituality you discover, the more of human possibilities. Man begins with man the animal, then he becomes man as a human being with a refined intellect. Then he becomes man the divine when he finally realizes the divinity within. So in Holy Mother's life also we find that as all the incarnations demonstrate this trend, as the Upanishads say, Upanishads in fact begin with the Annamaya Kosha. And they say that the gross physical existence, they say in fact Annamaya Brahma, they in fact say that that is also a reality, but it is a gross reality. So we go from lower to higher. So Annamaya Brahma or Pranamaya Atma, the Atma is the self. So they say that there are 5 different selves. So the first self is the Annamaya self, Annamaya Atma. Then you have Pranamaya Atma, the vital sheath or the vital self. As you identify for yourself, your ultimate self, the real self with these lower selves, you get a limited idea of what you really are. If you focus on the Annamaya Atma, then you at the most will become a good bodybuilder or a strong sportsman with a little bit of mental development and mental skills. But as you advance in spirituality, perhaps greater things are explored by you, and one comes to know that there are far more greater powers lying dormant than these physical powers. So their intellectual powers are manifest, are first explored, then they are developed, and then the human being transforms himself into a person with a strong body and a strong mind. With that as an instrument, he goes further. So, before Holy Mother, the first part of her life was spent in this kind of training. Sri Ramakrishna started with the fundamentals of spiritual life and then slowly, gradually raised her to the level. Of course, it was through her efforts also. It's not just Sri Ramakrishna trained her, but Sri Ramakrishna showed her the path. That is what a spiritual consort is supposed to do. When they enact the divine play, they transmit or they demonstrate these truths, these four yogas. And Sri Ramakrishna explained to her, and which she practiced after his passing away. You can see the flowering of a great spiritual personality, which had remained hidden. It not that it was not expressed before. She was born with those divine powers, but they remained in a very dormant state, you can say. That is what all the description about the various incidents of Holy Mother shows, that she did not express much when Sri Ramakrishna was alive. He was doing all the teaching, the preaching, and also training the disciples. Everything was done by him, including Srima Sharda Devi. In fact, her biographer writes, Sri Ramakrishna's biography also, it is mentioned that he was very meticulous in training his disciples. How one should conduct oneself in the world, how one should do all the different duties, how not to waste things, how to live a simple life with high thinking. So, all the wonderful training she required, or any of the disciples required to live a harmonious life in this world, was imparted by Sri Ramakrishna, depending on the level in which the different disciples were. Some of them were born with divine powers, like Narendranath. So Sri Ramakrishna did not have to make much efforts to raise their explore or to inspire them to manifest the immense spiritual possibilities lying within. So when he did that, when he trained Holy Mother, in fact, he taught everything, right from how to light a lamp, how to waste, how to see that the oil is conserved and you don't waste much oil, how to save water, how to wash dishes, everything practically he demonstrated. And along with that, all the great spiritual truths which he had discovered by his own effort through sadhana, with under the guidance of gurus who came to him from different parts of India. They came, he did not seek them. They came, they gave, and then they came and gave the necessary instructions, spiritual instructions, which were relevant to that particular path. So he had the choice of following all the different paths, and the respective gurus came to him. And then finally, they ended up by learning certain things which made them perfect. So it began with the Guru's teaching Sri Ramakrishna, but he was the Jagat Guru. And finally, they ended up invariably in all the cases, they learned it some things from Sri Ramakrishna which they had not learnt in their own tradition. So they made their knowledge complete. But for all practical purposes, they came as gurus, they taught. So also, Holy Mother was born perfect, but to show to the world how an ideal disciple or how an ideal spiritual consort conducts herself. And she demonstrates all the four yogas, which was what Sri Ramakrishna taught, to develop all the faculties, the faculty of thinking, Jnana Yoga, the faculty of emotions, Bhakti Yoga, the faculty of willpower, using the willpower rightly, is karma yoga. And finally, the capacity to restrain the thoughts, so that that power which is generated by reducing or restraining the thoughts and removing all the kleshas, as yoga demonstrates, a tremendous spiritual energy or power is generated, which is often termed as kundalini, the power which enables a aspirant to realize these great spiritual truths. So it's when only when this power, through the power of meditation, through the power of Raj Yoga, uh, which we need to balance or harmonize these four yogas, the other three aspects of a human personality. So the second part of our life, the Madhya Leela, which extends up to, you see, from 1886 when Sri Ramakrishna passed away or entered into Mahasamadhi till 1908 or 9 when the Udbodhan was built, and then finally from 1909 to 20 where she was living in Udbodhan, the house which was built for her. Innumerable devotees, householders, monastics used to come to her for information. And Sri Ma Sharda Devi as the Guru, the role which Sri Ramakrishna played towards the end of his life, which has been described in the Guru Bhav Purvartha and the Guru Bhav Uttarardha of Leela Prasanga, that we will see in the Divine Mother's life, and the different messages she gave and the different incidents which we see in her life from 1909 to 1920. So that was the period where she showered whatever she had gained in the first phase of her life in with the help of Sri Ramakrishna, and then through her own sadhana, practice of the four yogas in that intermediate period. So that is how we are going to classify the entire life and divide it into three broad phases. So the next thing we'll see that though we can divide her life in these three phases, there were certain things which were common. The stateliness, the wonderful, simple and pure life. These were not, we cannot say that these were developed in the first phase or the second phase. The historical events have been divided in three different phases, but Holy Mother's life all along was not only simple but absolutely pure. So some of the qualities which she you can say she demonstrated right from childhood are simplicity, purity, modesty, her humility. These are the qualities which never left her. These were the qualities she exhibited, whether she was in the first stage of her life, second stage, and even towards the end. That innate simplicity, that innate purity which was there. And then in the later stages, you will see her love and compassion. Not that she did not love, even when she was a small girl, when there was famine, when her father arranged to feed thousands of people who would come to their door. You can see the love and compassion. She used to go, and the young Sarada was hardly a small girl, and she used to mm, serve these people, these famished people, people who due to famine were hungry. She used to, father used to arrange for cooking a lot of khichdi and other meals for them, and she used to serve that hot food to all those people who used to come in very big numbers. That was the days, those were the days when there was famine all over India, especially in Bengal. People used to die of starvation, and because of failure of rain and because of some other political reason, there were famines, very frequent famines, and a lot of people died. So during that, those famines which were so frequent, especially in rural areas, it was uh, the wonderful love and compassion of her father, who also was a great personality who, whatever little savings he had, whatever little rice and other things he had, he arranged to feed these poor people till things became better. We can see that love and compassion which conquer our hearts in young Sarada as well. So these are the qualities which never left her, which were inherited by her or which were demonstrated by her when she was young and which continued till the last day. So we have her simple and pure life, her innate modesty, her humility with great love and compassion, and her struggle. That is one more part aspect of her life. Her struggle and suffering. They the way she is in a very uh, calm and collected manner, in a very detached manner, she underwent all the sufferings, all the struggles and the ordeals she had to face throughout her whole life, whether it was childhood or whether it was her later life as a young woman or after her coming to Dakshineshwar. The amount of hardship and struggle she had to face, she faced everything. Her contentment never, she was always content, and her indifference to her the poverty she had to face. Normally poverty makes people complain and they make people feel lowly, but there was a kind of, or maybe small things, the pleasures of life when we miss, we seem to grumble and we seem to envy other people who have it. But she was never disgruntled over or she never grumbled over small things. Whatever was available, or whatever things were available, whatever facilities were available to her, even when Sri Ramakrishna was alive, whatever they, whatever situation she had to be in different situations as a um, spiritual concert or as a Sahadharmini of Sri Ramakrishna, she had to cook for a large number of people, and that made her very tired because there was nobody to help, and there was a lot of poverty also. So still people used to flock, and the means were less. So she was totally indifferent to poverty, and whatever little she had, she freely distributed that. And she never complained or one can never see Holy Mother being disgruntled over small things. And then that forbearance. But still, with all these sufferings and difficulties, she never for a moment, as Nivedita writes, lost her stateliness. The stateliness which you can see in the royal family or maybe the royal queen. So that kind of stateliness uh, was seen in her life. That's what Nivedita says. So then she had to undergo so many diseases. She endured all those things silently, partly because of lack of nutrition. There are many things which were responsible for the struggle she had to face, for the trouble she had trouble in the knee, she had to stand for long hours, stay in small rooms. So all this never made her change or made her give up the ideal of truthfulness or the steadiness or the stateliness which one could see in her life. That convinces us that and then she had such a broad heart. She would forgive everybody, no matter how people treated her or what type of people came to her. That divinity, that stateliness, that steadiness, or that you may say that quiet dignity which we see in her, that never waned, that never became weak. No, nothing could deter her from showing compassion. Then we see there are certain other qualities which she retained. One was a strong common sense and a presence of mind. Nothing could emotionally upset her. Normally, a lot of people, they are they have a lot of turbulent emotions which rock the boat of their life. But she had perfect control over her emotions, and you can see that she had a very strong common sense. She would not do anything out of emotion. She was steady and a wonderful presence of mind. She knew how to act, when to act, and how to react, everything. So what a ideal woman in those days, or even today, a modern woman, how can she live a life to be an ideal, to be an ideal woman or an ideal mm, mother? That she showed through her unselfish service and also complete surrender. So that is why we say Ramakrishna Gata Prana. Her life was not detached. Never she thought that she was detached for any single moment. That's why we say Ramakrishna Gata Prana, one whose life force was one with Sri Ramakrishna's. So it really didn't matter whether after his Mahasamadhi also, she felt the wonderful presence of Sri Ramakrishna and got lot of strength and sustenance from that. So in this way, she demonstrated the real truths of the Upanishads and the Vedanta. And as we are going to discuss through our Wednesday class, the science of human possibilities, whatever possibilities a a woman can express, especially a woman. She was ideal for both men as well as women. But her particular role was to show how women can express their wonderful, latent, inherent spiritual possibilities, all the possibilities and human possibilities, you can say, to the fullest extent and make oneself divine. So she reconciled in her own life. This she did by reconciling in her own life a very active attitude. She was always seen to be doing some activity or the other. But at the same time, she was intensely contemplative. Normally, people think, those who like to meditate, those who they just think that activity or intense activity is detrimental to a meditative life. That is what generally most of the people feel. But for Holy Mother, her activity, which was done in the spirit of Karma Yoga, could be easily reconciled with the contemplative life she led, getting up early in the morning, sitting for long hours, and then even the actions that she did, the cooking that she did, the cleaning that she did, the way she spoke, and how she conducted herself in the world was intensely contemplative. You could see, if you see many of the photographs, if you see, there is a look of meditation in her eyes, the way she conducts herself. So people have, in their reminiscences, they have described this idea of steadiness, stateliness, which comes out of a intensely meditative life, which it never left her. So in general, Holy Mother is like a shining pillar of light, who who for most of the lost and weary souls who comprise the world, a majority of the people find this world weariness come to them at least in the last stage of their life. As the Upanishad says, a kind of world weariness comes for different people at different stages of life. For some it comes early. It's not a negative feeling, it's a kind of feeling that no matter what you do in the gross world, you will not get the rest or get the kind of peace that you really deserve or seek, that you are seeking. You may seek peace and get these things, and you may believe that one will get peace if we get all these things, but it makes us more restless. So that Holy Mother showed that you can find the true meaning in your life by not considering the meditative life and the active life as contradictory. No matter how active we are, it is Holy Mother's life shows us, Srima Sharda Devi's life shows us that one can be intensely active. Nobody was more active than she was. She used to get up early, do all her duties, cook food, feed others, clean the vessels, and so much, without much support from her companions. Now and then somebody would come, and but the workload she had shows how active her life was. But at the same time, it was deep and contemplative. Nothing could disturb her or make her lose her balance. The mental state, it was very clear that there was a lot of peace, bliss, and not only that, it was so contagious that though that sense of peace, that sense of contentment, that sense of bliss which comes out of a deep realization of the great spiritual truths, she could impart it very effortlessly to people around her. So a lot of women disciples, especially, who were troubled, who had a lot of issues to solve in their day-to-day life, they used to come and find Holy Mother, a person, a wonderful teacher who would calm down their mind by her very presence. As Sister Nivedita wrote a beautiful poem like the wonderful dew, which with which the white rose blooms. She has written a beautiful description. So also Holy Mother's quiet presence, the quiet spirituality that pervaded her throughout, even as a child and till the end of her life, even when she was physically very sick. But that kind of inner peace, that kind of inner joy, that kind of inner bliss, and the solace which people got by seeing her, enjoy that, and not only enjoy that blaze, that wonderful uh, peace, but they were communicated without even speaking words. Her mere presence was enough for many people to get all their doubts cleared, to all their sorrows mitigated, and somehow they seem to get in some solution or the other from the Holy Mother. So, when we compare Sri Ramakrishna's life, it can be considered as a life of condensed spirituality. We'll find lot of spiritual visions and divine experiences, a very intense life, a condensed spiritual life of several centuries, several faiths, several experiences, which he condensed, and within a short time he went through all these phases. So there was like a storm. So he can be compared to some kind of condensed spirituality, and there is a wonderful way of expressing it. If his spirituality can be compared to the snow of the Himalayas. Sri Ramakrishna was a spiritual giant in his own right. So all the great experiences like Shiva, Shiva is always in Indian mythology is supposed to sit on the Mount Kailash, which is a snowy mountain. So the snow is a uh, the snow on these mountains, the Himalayas especially, was always symbolic of Shiva, a quiet, meditative, intense life of condensed spirituality. So, if that is the snow, Holy Mother's life, not that she did not exhibit that, her life was one of flow, a river which was flowing, in which spirituality was flowing literally like a river. Just as we see the snow of the Himalayas when uh, when it when it flows down, all the sources of more major rivers in India are found in the snowy mountains. So from those mountains, when the river like Ganga and other rivers, they come down to the plains, it is the same water which was there on the top of the Himalayas. It has melted and come down as a rapidly flowing river. So Holy Mother's life, if you say, the spirituality which was in the form of snow, Sri Ramakrishna led an intense life which was like the snow covering the mountains. And that same snow, when it melted and touched the hearts of, like a river flowing, and uh, uh, the parched hearts thirsting for spirituality, it was Holy Mothers who came in the form of a river. That's why the rivers are all feminine, except for one river which is Brahmaputra, all the rivers Ganga, Yamuna, and all the Indian rivers are addressed as if it in the feminine gender. So Ganga, so Shakti is the flow. Shiva is always, the mountain is always masculine. So the Shiva aspect of the divine, or Sri Krishna, who is like that Shiva aspect, intense spirituality, condensed spirituality, like the snow condenses. And when it flows, when the wonderful water of spirituality flows and touches the ground or touches the river bed and then the banks, and then brings a lot of solace and peace to the weary souls, people who are thirsting for water. She goes up to the ocean. The river flows up to the ocean. So Holy Mother's life was like that flowing spirituality. The melted snow turns to water, but the substance is same. That which was snow, that which was Sri Ramakrishna, has come down as Holy Mother, as just as one is a solid, the solid has become liquid, the ice has become water, and that is the water. So we cannot see the physical forms of Sri Ramakrishna or their or the Holy Mother. Only a few lucky people might have had seen some visions, but it really, though we cannot see that, that doesn't mean that we cannot benefit from their life and teachings. Their lives and teachings are living in our hearts. They can be not only be absorbed in the hearts, not only be understood, but they can be put into practice to transform ourselves into divine personalities. So the lives and teachings of the Holy Mother, if we study, it just as it has satisfied or quenched the thirst of parched hearts. A lot of people whose hearts were parched because of the suffering they had to undergo in the world. To them, Holy Mother's wonderful life, which she lived for such a long time, even after the passing away of Sri Ramakrishna, the snow of Sri Ramakrishna, as it were, the snow of spirituality that was Sri Ramakrishna on the top of the Himalayas, that melted and came. That's a wonderful way of expressing it, that the Shiva expresses the Shakti as a flowing river would go and uh, satisfy the thirst of the past hearts. So that's why every religious person, whether it's in the West or East, they are supposed to give innumerable human beings, jivas like us, shelter, rest, and peace, some kind of security, some kind of shelter, some kind of protection in this life which is torn with so many conflicts. So many times we seek help, and human help comes to us, but it is not sustainable, or maybe that help is not fully useful to us. That help comes, temporary solutions are found in the world, but ultimately it is the divine help of an incarnation. As we see even in the Christian tradition or the other religious traditions, it is the divine grace or the which gives shelter, which gives protection, which redeems humankind and solves all their tapatraya, the three kinds of sorrow which we referred to in our Raj Yoga class. There are these three: physical, mental, and causal. These are the troubles which are taken care of by the Divine Mother. So, Divine Mother or Shakti, in this case it is Sri Ma Sharda Devi. So, so now we will, from the next class, we will try to find out, uh, try to think loudly, or maybe try to meditate upon or contemplate upon the wonderful life and message. As you all know, the first important biography was both. The first was in fact written in 1940 when Swami Tapasyananda wrote Sri Sharda Devi, the Holy Mother. Then we had a bigger biography, or a more information was available, that is during the centenary of the Holy Mother, 1853, 1953 and 254. Swami Gambiranji wrote a Bengali biography and himself translated it into English, and the name of that biography is Holy Mother Sri Sharda Devi. Finally, in 62, we find in the West, keeping the Western women in mind, Swami Nikhilananda wrote a beautiful biography. These are the three wonderful biographies which were written, and recently, of course, the book which we are following now, The Divine Play of Holy Mother, where many things are taken from these three biographies and enlarged, and many of the new incidents have been added. So, many people find it easy, especially the English speaking people, find it that this book, Sri Ma Sharda Devi and the Divine Play, is a very wonderful companion or a companion volume to the earlier biographies. Because most of the things which are expressed there are definitely covered in this volume, but in addition, we get a lot of new information which was scattered here and there in Bengali language. So that is the reason why we have taken up a study, because and then there are so many books on the Holy Mother. We at least there's a list which Swami Chetananji has made. At least 14 books are there which give a lot of authentic information on the Holy Mother. One is the great book Mayer Katha by Holy Mother's disciple, which we are discussing every alternate Saturday as the Gospel of Holy Mother. That is known as Mayer Katha. But there are some other books which have been included in the English Gospel of Sri Ma Sharda Devi. That is Sri Sri Mayer Smriti Katha by Swami Sharadeshanandji, who was a very respected monk of her order and was a disciple of Holy Mother, Gopesh Maharaj. So he wrote a book, Sri Sri Mayer Smriti Katha, and that has been translated into English, of course, as The Mother as I Saw Her. So that is what Sharadeshanji wrote. Then Parmeshwaranji was also a disciple of Holy Mother. He also wrote Sri Sri Ma O Jairam Bati. So since he lived mostly in Jairam Bati, Swami Parmeshwaranji gives an account of the wonderful village of Jairam Bati and how Holy Mother, in the light of Holy Mother's life and teachings, how Jairam Bati evolved and became a place of pilgrimage. Then there is another book, Sri Ma, written by Ashutosh Mitra. This Ashutosh Mitra was the brother of Swami Trigunaatitananda, who later on became a monk who started our San Francisco Center. He came to the West and inspired by Swami Vivekananda, who asked him to go and do, and he lived and passed away in the West, the west coast of America, in San Francisco. He built the first Hindu temple. So that Swami's brother, who also wanted to become a monk, but he could not, his name was Ashutosh Mitra. So he wrote this wonderful book, Sri Ma. That's the name. Sri Ma means Holy Mother. Then there is another reminiscences of Pravrajika, edited by Pravrajika Nirbhay Prana, which is known as Bharti Prana Smriti Katha. She was the first president and she was also a disciple of Holy Mother. She was the first president of Sharda Math. So Bharti Prana Smriti Katha. So her spiritual reminiscences are published in Bengali. So all these wonderful works which are scattered have been made use of and expressed and nicely rearranged, and we have this wonderful biography of Holy Mother. Then of course there is Sri Sri Matri Darshan, which was also compiled by Swami Chetanananda. Then we have Sri Ma Sharda Devi by Swami Gambirananda, Sri Ma Sharda, Sri Sri Sharda Devi by Brahmachari Akshay Chaitanya, who also wrote a biography. Then we have Sri Sri Ma Shardamani Devi by Manada Shankar Dasgupta, Sri Sri Mayer Jivan Katha by Swami Bhumananda, who was one of the old monks, earlier monks. Then, of course, a lot of mention is there in Sri Sri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga. Though it is Thakur's biography, a lot of chapters and lot of sections of that where Holy Mother's, a detailed account of Holy Mother's life you can get, especially her interactions with Sri Ramakrishna and even later. And then, of course, there is this Holy Mother in English by Swami Shardananda. So we'll take up all these sources they have been in fact taken up and organized in such a nice way in this book, Sri Ma Sharda Devi and her Divine Play. So most of these things are based on eyewitness accounts. You have to remember that. And reminiscences for of Holy Mother's life, Holy Mother's disciples whose lives, who lived for a long time with her. It's not that they were casual acquaintances. They were her disciples. They had the good fortune of living with their guru. Some of them would have lived for more than 30 years, who were very closely associated with Holy Mother. So they have given, or they have penned down their own reminiscences, and to collect all these wonderful reminiscences, there's such a huge material on Holy Mother. To collect this, but it requires somebody to coherently arrange it, organize it, and then publish it in the form which Swami Chetananji has done. So we will be, and in the book also, the author, or the one who has compiled this beautiful book, Swami Chetananji mentions that he has, as far as possible, tried not to change the Bengali words. Sometimes when we try to give the essence of something which has been spoken in another language, it loses, not only loses some of its charm, but sometimes it can be misconstrued. It can be wrongly understood. So Swami Chetananji has tried to be as literal as possible. And that's the approach, that is how the approach should be. Even when we study scriptures, when we study the translations, unless one can give the true gist of what the Sanskrit says, we have to change it in a vernacular or maybe English. So also Holy Mother's literature or her life and message, if we have to understand it properly, the translation should be as exact as possible to the original, as close as possible to the original. Though English language cannot do justice to many of the colloquial vernacular words, even Sanskrit, which are all based on Sanskrit. So most of these different languages in which translations which are of books which are written in different languages, especially Bengali, it is very difficult to maintain the original flavor, the original meaning, which often gets lost when we try to find a synonym, try to find express it in English. So it's a commendable work, and we have to be a bit careful also that we try to compare the ideas that we get when we discuss this life to some of the original biographies that which we, most of us, would have read, especially those who have been initiated. It's mandatory for them to read the detailed life of Srima Sharda Devi. So these disciples take us back in time and try to show us how the divinity, no doubt it was a Leela, it was a divine play, but yet the divine play has unfolded in a particular sequence. So that makes it very interesting and spiritually beneficial, because when we are passing through the same stages, especially women, for women, it is an indispensable book, because Sister Nivedita believed that she was not only the last of the old order of women who can serve as role models, but she is the first in the new order of women also. She can start a new tradition for womankind. Not that men cannot learn from her. There are many qualities which are gender neutral. We don't, but there are certain unique characteristics of women which she demonstrated to demonstrate what ideal motherhood of God is. And that she says, I have done much more. In one of her conversations, you will find that somebody asked, do you think you have fulfilled the responsibility which Thakur had given to you? Then she says, I have done much more than what was expected of me. So this is a wonderful life, especially uh, the whole divine play. If we study in the context of the Thursday class, the Great Master, that is also translated, retranslated, but the Great Master is the original book. So It can be a wonderful companion's volume and a wonderful study of a uh, spiritual personality of this age who lived to fulfill or lived to demonstrate before the world that whether you are a man or a woman, whichever gender you belong to, both are every human soul has the capacity to manifest that divinity within. So we will conclude here. We'll begin with the actual life in the next class. So let me see if there are some questions. Yeah. The first question is, when during sadhana can one begin to realize the gradual manifestation that their body mind, the manifestation in their body mind is happening? Thakur realized Ma Sharda's potential. How is that so? Okay, so the idea here is that when do we, in our attempt to practice spirituality, when do we come to a stage where we understand that we are becoming less and less gross? That is, in other words, how do we guess or how do we judge ourselves or try to evaluate to what level we have risen? Holy Mother's life itself shows what it means to lead a pure and exact, a spiritual life which expresses divinity in every moment of our life. So, Holy Mother is the ideal, not only for women, for everybody, but especially for women, where a practical demonstration of spirituality is is put before the entire world. So we can take whatever we can, whatever we are able to grasp, whatever we are able to not only grasp but practice, whatever we can do. If we try to absorb these ideals and put it into practice, even a little of that, what Holy Mother did. As Sri Krishna says, I have done 1 rupee, you do at least 16 annas, you do 1 anna. So 1/16 of what I have done, if you do, it will be enough that will lead to spiritual growth. So Holy Mother's life, or even our own life, if we see, the test of spirituality is how gross or how unselfish we have become. How much do we cling to the gross and how much we cling to the subtler and higher aspects of reality? That is a very clear indication. One does not have to pass certain exams to know what level you are. In the school and colleges, we had grades. Oh, if you are a knowledgeable person, you will have good grades and a higher class. That's how you get yourself promoted. But here the only test is unselfishness. And as Swamiji says, unselfishness is the test of spirituality. When you say me and mine, when the ego comes, no matter how good it is, you restrict yourself. You restrict yourself. Your soul should expand. The mind should expand. The attitude should expand. But if it doesn't happen, if one is selfish, so one has to gradually see that they are becoming more and more unselfish as the day passes. And the second quality which Swamiji said and which we see in the Holy Mother is that divine strength. So if one grows spirituality, one not only expands his heart or becomes unselfish, but at the same time he feels a tremendous amount of self-confidence and strength within himself, because it is only the spiritual power within, if it manifests, gives you real strength. All the other strengths that you see, this boasting, that's trying to pressurize other people, shouting at people, they are physical manifestations, but they are very, very gross. They are not real strength. But the sadhana or the different levels, when we start judging ourselves or start judging other people, you will find that they gain in strength, they gain in wisdom, they gain in, you may say, unselfishness. So all these characteristics, if they come, then you may say that a particular person or one's own self is getting more and more spiritual. So that is the only test we can do. Yeah. So let me see if there is one more question. Otherwise, we'll take leave. Yeah. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.
Thank you,
So
Maharaj.
tomorrow, as I announced earlier, we will start a class. It will be from 7 to 8. Those who are interested, they can attend. It will be on the science of human possibilities. What are the human possibilities according to the Upanishads? We know that there are possibilities in the physical world, possibilities in the mental world, and there are a lot of training courses and wonderful attempts have been made. Counseling is there where the gross powers or the gross capacities or the gross possibilities are explored. That every human being does, every mother or father does it and wants to see that the child has expressed his full potential, the physical and the mental. But spiritual potential, whether one has manifest or not, that we don't give so much importance to that. That is assessed only when one grows and takes to spirituality. But Upanishads say this earlier you begin, the better. So we have to understand that along with physical and mental possibilities, there is a spiritual possibility also within us, which has needs to be explored and expressed. So the tomorrow's class or the series of classes that we'll take from Wednesday will deal with the science of human possibilities as expressed and expounded in the Upanishads. We will not discuss too much, though we have to cover it because the different levels of our existence, they impact each other. So we can't say that we'll deal only with the spiritual aspect of our personality and neglect the physical and mental. We can't do that. We have to graduate. We have to start from Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, simultaneously holding on to the highest. So we will discuss it in the uh, class on Wednesday classes. So Monday will only be the free day. But I am most of the people who cannot attend the class, they can see it later on YouTube. But this will be an attempt to the Wednesday class on the science of human possibilities according to the Upanishads will be an attempt to find out the underlying aspects, an in-depth study of the Upanishads, what the Upanishads say about a human being, the different capacities, the different potentialities he has, other than gross and subtle, the mental and the physical. Those are definitely important, but beyond that, including that, what are the different possibilities? We'll make an with lot of references from the Upanishads. It's not that it will be discussed from a particular book, but all the Upanishads, when they speak of different aspects of our personality and how to train them and how to uh, effect a transformation in our own lives, that is what we will discuss in the Wednesday class. So I'll take your leave. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti